I'm Joey Kneiser. I just made a movie called Mr. Presto. It's my first movie. Up to this point, I've been playing music and touring, and mainly I've been a songwriter for most of my adult life. I've always been really into movies, and actually movies were my first love affair when I was a kid. My dad had a huge movie collection, about maybe 1,000 or 2,000 VHS tapes, and I would watch them all the time. So by the time I was in high school, I'd pretty much seen like every kind of important movie up until that point. The way I got to music was actually from movies in two different ways. One of those ways was that I realized that songs could be narrative and like little movies. When I heard like a Rolling Stone and I heard Born to Run, and I thought like, oh, this is like a little tiny movie. It was very, very cinematic. And the other one was when I was in sixth grade, I started skateboarding. I would watch skate videos all the time. And that's when I realized like, oh, you can make movies. Like these are just kids making movies. Then they're not ever gonna show in a theater or anything, and they can do whatever they want. And so that was when I really decided that I wanted to do something with moving pictures. At the time, it seemed impossible. And when I went to college, I originally wanted to go to college to go to film school, but my vision is like if anybody knows about vision or their prescription, my prescription is a -18, which is by description of the United States government, I'm basically blind. And so, an average person might be like a -6 or a -4 or something. Okay, my vision is -18. And so I've never driven a car. When I originally wanted to go to film school, and I moved to out here, I wanted to go to the Watkins Institute. At that time, this was in the early 90s, it still was all film. And so you had to have a 16 millimeter camera, and we didn't have the kind of technology that we have now with like monitors that you can put real close to you, and you can have focus peaking. And so I basically had to wait until technology got to the point where I could actually do it, The one thing about movies is it's not a young man's game like rock and roll is. Rock and roll is a young man's game. Like, Robert Altman was making movies into his 80s, like John Huston. They were all making movies like way, there is no age to cinema, which is one reason I love it so much, that you can be of any age and it doesn't really matter, I basically decided, most people, they hit their midlife crisis and like buy a motorcycle or something, or they buy a sports car. And like, I've been wanting to make a movie my whole entire life, and I've been wanting to just make movies my whole entire life. And so when I hit my midlife crisis, I bought a cinema camera. and then once I had the camera, my wife was like, okay, you have the camera, you have to make the movie. And I was like, all right, yeah, I'll make the movie. And so I had to figure out how to make a movie with no money and no actors. And so I kind of came up with an idea for Mr. Presto, and then Shane, who plays Lowell, I would call him because I knew I was just looking to see what we had access to. And so like he has that 1990s van, and I was like, okay, if we shoot your van, it's free. We don't have to have a location. We can always shoot driving or in parking lots or something like that. So let's build it around the van. It'll be an easy thing to be able to film. And then we'll just have you be in the van. And then, my initial idea was to make it somehow about music. And I didn't want it to be, I thought it would be too on the nose if I just made a movie about music. And so I was just like, well, how can we make it about being a musician without actually being having musicians in it. And I was like, well, we'll just make it about a magician. Like, who are the other, well, first I was like, who are the other people that live like musicians, who make no money, and they have to travel all the time, like, who would potentially live in their van? And we're like, it could either be a comedian, or it could be a magician. And then I was like, well, if we do a magician, then we could do all kinds of stupid stuff, because it'd be like, he's a magician, right. And so I was like, but it will still be a love letter to music, because I thought, like, what are the two pieces of personalities to somebody who is a musician? And that is, there's the one side of you that is constantly wanting to like live free and like be able to do your art and to be a kid all the time and to like have no responsibilities. And then there's the other part of you that is always, trying to stop that part. That's like, you got to grow up. You can't, life is not about, following your dreams unless they pay off, big or something. And it's that nagging voice. So I was like, well, I'm just going to make it two brothers. But they're really just, it's the two sides of what it's like to be an artist, basically. Mm-hmm. One's the straight-laced person who complains all the time and doesn't want to try or do anything, and then the other one lives completely free and does not care about anything, And so that basically, it seemed very easy to put something like that together, because I had Shane already, and then Eric, who was a drummer for Glossary, he is also really into movies. And so the three of us were just like, well, just make a movie, and I'll make it about these two brothers. And then I just went home and I spent a couple weeks, writing a story. And then when we got, knowing though that we would, there was no way we'd be able to stick completely to it, because we didn't have any money or no locations. We'd have to change stuff. We'd have to rewrite on the spot. We'd have to, so the movie, I would say, is probably like 85% of the script. And then the rest of it is just maybe 80%. And then the rest of it is having to change it on the fly, improving and stuff. Right. Making a scene up like, oh, we should have a scene like this. And then we just would make it up on the spot, put it together. The whole reason we made this movie was literally to like three people who like was obsessed with movies their whole life to actually make a movie, which is such a just like join a club that like very rare few people get to say, is that you like made a feature film, because when I told people I made a film, they're like, oh, it's like 30 minutes. I'm like, no, it's like an hour and 50 minutes. Yeah. Like, it's like a movie, And so it was really, the movie was written like for the sole purpose of something that could be made. Like, it wasn't like, oh, let's sit down and we'll come up with the idea for a movie that we've always wanted to make. It was like, we got these things, how could we make a movie out of them? And then in that little tiny constraint, like make the best idea up out of it, that we could do with little to nothing, no money or, and no actors, little time, all favors. Like the movie, we might have spent like $4,000 on the movie. Right. And $3,500 of it was, at one point, the van that is the main character. Like literally 2 months before the movie was finished, the transmission went out, and we had to replace the transmission in it. So that's really where all the money went.